Hi everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of NetSupport Insights. Today we've got some people from Down Under. We have Dr. Matthew Harrison and future Dr. Jess from the University of Melbourne. Guys, thank you for coming on with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Of
It's
course.
exciting.
So you are doing some very interesting research right now. Tell us a little bit about what you're studying and what you're hoping to get out of that.
Yeah, so Jess and myself are looking at how we can create inclusive esports programs. And we're using a broad umbrella term for inclusive, so it's not just looking at disability, which is my area of passion, neurodivergence, but also looking at how we can make gender inclusive esports programs, culturally responsive esports programs, and looking at how we can support students in rural and regional areas to be able to participate on an equal basis. It's really exciting.
That's amazing. Now, you're talking about inclusivity across the board. Where do you feel like the gaps are right now in esports? And then obviously a lot of it's unconscious bias, so where are you seeing those gaps?
So I think one gap that I see a lot, and I think Jess and I are both country kids, and we see this big gap between in resourcing and infrastructure between people in regional and rural areas. In Australia, like the United States, is a very big country, and you have very, very different access to quality of internet access in a regional area. Even just the cost of internet access in regional, even remote areas, it's so much more expensive. So thinking about how we can remove some of those barriers for schools and for families to have their kids able to have a rich, a really excellent experience.
Yeah, so really giving more equity to it and thinking about how everyone can be incorporated and involved and not making assumptions about everyone having the access that they have.
And I think Jess is doing some really cool research around neurodiversity women, so I thought I'll pass it over to Jess.
Yes, tell us, please.
Yeah, so my PhD is looking at the experiences of adult neurodivergent women in gaming communities, because we know that women have definitely been part of the gaming community for a long time, but haven't always historically been represented, which is a bit disappointing, but things are changing, which is great. In terms of esports, this is definitely something I've noticed, and as part of our project we interviewed quite a few schools in Australia who've been running really good inclusive esports programs, and especially this amazing teacher from Queensland, so up in our sunny north, and she has particularly been working with girls in her esports program. And one of the biggest things I thought was really interesting was that, yes, there's definitely some girls that have benefited from, girls only esports competitive leagues, where, it's others like them, but then others haven't always felt like that's truly inclusive either, because in a way they're still getting othered to the sidelines. So I think it's really interesting to try and find a balance between having those, conditions with other girls only, which for some people does feel more comfortable, but also making sure that they do have equal opportunity to participate in mixed gender leagues with no disadvantage if that's, what they want to be in with the boys as well.
Yeah, and you're giving a point, like the visibility aspect of, girls have been underrepresented, with females especially, and when you don't see yourself in something, you have a hard time feeling like I belong there. Yeah. And I know in the US, I don't know if you guys experience this, when girl gamers get on versus boy gamers, the language changes, how they react to them changes. Yeah. Have you found anything in your research so far? Are you looking into kind of the gamers themselves and what's happening with them and how we can sort of shift or change that for the gamers?
It's interesting because, like you said, there's big differences in how women, who are prominent in gaming are received. And there was one study I read that was really quite fascinating, but also a bit disappointing, that they looked at Twitch streamers, and the female Twitch streamers received, I think it was nearly 3 times more comments on their appearance. But overall, the amount of comments that they were getting compared to the male participants, the male streamers, was the same. So it's a very different way that they're being received, the things people are commenting on, the way that they're treating them. And another thing was that the lack of representation in esports of women was a barrier to women trying to participate. And there was a couple of really good studies that found that, instead of education on, this is how we should be treating female gamers, just having them up there front and center, breaking those stereotypes was actually something that was far more effective in, reducing that gender gap than, trying to tell boys that the women belong here too.
You gotta go about it in a very strategic way, right? You gotta look at the whole thing. That's awesome. So as the research goes along, what other areas do you feel like you need to focus on, or what are your next steps as part of the process?
Yeah, I think we work with someone called Dan who runs the esports leagues in Australia for schools. So he's been fantastic just learning about his school's experiences and this sort of communities that those schools are working with, and then the things that they've found, in a practical context of being in the room with those kids with esports, that has helped make a difference. Because our school system in Australia is also, quite diverse. There's schools in really rural areas that don't have as much access to infrastructure. There's private schools that have, quite a lot of funding to support resourcing and equipment. There's schools in metropolitan areas, that just don't have quite as much financial capital behind them. So we want to learn, what's working in all these different school contexts and how that can help fill in the gaps, because what works in one school might not be ideal for the rest. And it's through learning, from the teachers who've been doing this really, really well, I think is the best way for us to learn how we need to keep moving forward.
I think so. I like the idea of, obviously, you do the research, you're studying this, not just study this, but so you can find applicable ways to help schools to develop these programs, to do it the right way so it gets the better results, and of course more people can actually be involved in them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, I know you've worked with a bunch of schools too around this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come back in.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like it. It's good. It's really interesting. What I see in terms of, like, for me, another area of need is around that disability inclusion as well. And physical access needs is a big one. So kids who maybe who use a wheelchair, but more so have challenges with gross and fine motor skills. That's been something that we're really excited about exploring, how we can adapt and hack different technologies to allow them to participate in a way that allows them to play with their friends, regardless of their physical access needs.
That's awesome. Giving everybody the opportunity to be involved. It reminds me of when a lot of schools here started doing more inclusive playgrounds and having places where students with wheelchairs could get up and go because they couldn't get up there. And you have to think that through.
I love that analogy, and it is we say virtual playgrounds is what we want to create. And a bit like that is like, why would you build stairs when you can build a ramp? It's the same sort of argument as like when we're thinking about interface design for games or different controllers, how you can give a range of controllers and not saying that one's the pro controller. Wish Nintendo would stop calling their controller the pro controller.
I can feel the passion. I know.
I do, yes. Just change the name. But it's the idea of saying that you can be a legitimate gamer. If you have physical access needs, if you identify as female, non-binary, if you're from the country or a remote area, if you're, a First Nations Australian, it doesn't matter. The gaming is this area of strength and interest, and it's what brings people together.
Absolutely. It's that overarching, that some things that, transcend those different areas, and a lot of people come together that normally wouldn't come together, which is awesome. Like ISTE bringing everybody together here. And
it sure is.
Presenting. So what are you presenting on? Tell us a little bit. Is it this exactly the same thing or anything particular?
We're presenting on Wednesday at 10:30.
I believe it's 10:30.
At 10:30. Jess is much better at keeping track of time than I am. That's good. 10:30 Wednesday morning on inclusive esports programs and the framework we developed and some of the strategies we use to address some of those barriers we talked about earlier today.
That's awesome. Is there a place that people can go to look at what you've done so far to find some of these resources, or where would you direct them? Yeah,
you can find us on nextlevelcollaboration.com, which is our website. You can find me on X. It's Twitter. My handle is @HAT_designs. So hat is HATT. Designs, DESIGNS. And Jess is also on X.
Yes, I'm just Jess Rollings, not as creative as Matt. Sorry about that.
There you go. Well, everybody, make sure you take a look and check out more about inclusivity in esports. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
I will steal from my favorite Down Under, Steve Irwin. Good day, mate, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.